A sealed envelope, a wedding ring glinting beneath a pale lamp, and one line echoing through my head: protect her, even if she never understands why. That's how it all began. Not with a vow of marriage, but with a warning whispered over a coffin. My name is John Whitaker, 67 years old, retired engineer, widower. A man who once believed that honesty was the only fortune no one could steal. But that belief didn't survive the day my daughter Emily introduced me to a man whose smile didn't reach his eyes. His name was Ryan Brooks, and before long, that smile would tear my life open in ways I could never have imagined. It was raining that morning, the kind of rain that didn't wash away grief, only made it shimmer. Seattle rain, endless, familiar, cold. I stood in black, among rows of umbrellas, facing the coffin of James Whitmore, a man once called the legend of Washington finance, and the man I owed more than just respect. When the church bell tolled, it cut through the drizzle like a slow heartbeat. The smell of lilies mixed with wet wood and steel, the scent of endings. Beside me, Emily held a folded handkerchief, her fingers trembling. Rain and tears blurred together on her face. I placed my hand on her shoulder and said softly, "Your grandfather would be proud of you." She nodded, not knowing that within hours, her name would appear in a will worth $19 million. That afternoon, we drove through the gray streets to the office of Susan Blake, James's attorney. Her office was all glass and silence, a world of ticking clocks and coffee too bitter to drink. On her desk lay a single thick envelope, sealed with the Whitmore Holdings crest in gold. Susan adjusted her glasses and spoke with her usual precision. "James Whitmore left behind a family trust," she said, "valued at approximately $19 million. The sole beneficiary, Miss Emily Whitaker." Emily gasped, her hand covering her mouth. But Susan wasn't finished. "However," she continued, "the inheritance comes with strict conditions. It will only be released when Emily turns 30, and only if she remains unmarried for 1 year after Mr. Whitmore's death." The room went quiet, except for the faint ticking of the wall clock. Emily looked lost. I looked at the folder and felt something shift, a quiet alarm in my chest. Susan glanced at me, the kind of glance that says, "You understand what this means." Then, without a word, she reached into her drawer and handed me a smaller envelope. Unmarked, cream-colored, heavier than it looked. "For you, John," she said. I opened it carefully. Inside was a single, folded note, written in James's unmistakable hand, firm but frail. "If you reveal this too soon, they will come for her. Protect her, even if she never understands you." I didn't ask who they were, because if James Whitmore, a man who built empires and outsmarted Wall Street, used the word they, then he wasn't talking about ordinary people. He was warning me about predators who smile in daylight. That night, when Emily finally fell asleep, I drove back to my house in Shoreline. The rain hadn't stopped. It never does in November. The sound of it against the tin roof was steady, like time counting down to something inevitable. I went into my study, a small room lined with blueprints, rusted drafting tools, and a few forgotten memories of a life that used to make sense. In the back wall, behind a framed degree, was a small steel safe I'd installed decades ago. I opened it, placed the envelope and James's letter inside, and turned the dial 3 times. The metal clicked shut, sharp and final. I took a marker and wrote on the front, "Do not open." For a long while, I just sat there, staring at that cold gray door of the safe. It felt less like I was hiding money, and more like I was burying a piece of my daughter's innocence. The lamp on my desk flickered. Its light fell on a photograph. My late wife, Grace, laughing beside the old silver pickup I rebuilt for her 20 years ago. She used to say, "You can fix anything, John, but don't ever try to fix people. Some things aren't meant to be repaired." I smiled bitterly, quietly. She had been right. And that night, I realized there are kinds of damage you can't weld shut. Sleep didn't come. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw James's letter, the handwriting trembling, the ink pressed deep into the paper, as if he knew I'd need to feel his warning long after he was gone. "Protect her, even if she never understands you." Those words didn't feel like advice. They felt like an order. The next morning, the rain lightened to a fine mist. I returned to the funeral home to collect something the director said James had left for me. It was a small box, worn, heavy, with a faded tag bearing my name. Inside lay a pocket watch, its silver case dulled by time. I turned it over and read the engraving on the back. "Time reveals truth." I closed my hand around it and felt a weight far heavier than metal. As I stepped outside, A cold gust swept through the parking lot, carrying the smell of asphalt and rain-soaked pine. Across the street, near the corner, stood a woman in a red coat. Her umbrella tilted just enough to hide half her face. She wasn't talking to anyone. She wasn't moving, just watching. When her eyes met, she didn't flinch. No hostility, no warmth, only calculation. I gave her a polite nod, an old reflex, the kind you give a stranger you hope to never see again. But when the hearse began to roll, she turned and walked toward a black SUV parked at the curb. No license plate on the front, tinted windows. And for a moment I swear she glanced back and smirked. A chill crept up my spine. I told myself it was nothing. Just a mourner, maybe. But deep down, I already knew better. Because there's a kind of gaze you never forget. The one that measures you like a lock someone's planning to pick. That night, I wrote in my notebook, November 2023, James Whitmore's funeral. Emily inherits the trust. A woman in red. Final words. Protect her. I closed the book, turned off the lamp, and sat there in the dark, listening. The rain had stopped, but the silence that followed was louder than any storm. It wasn't peace. It was the sound of something waiting. I didn't know who they were yet. Not then. Not until the day Ryan Brooks walked through my door, with that same smile, the kind that hides a plan behind perfect teeth. And when he did, I finally understood what James had meant. Some storms don't begin in the sky. They begin the moment you open the wrong door. Seattle in January is a kind of cold that doesn't stab, it seeps. Through your coat, into your bones, and stays there, like a quiet reminder that winter isn't done with you yet. I was in the garage that morning, wiping the thin dust off the pocket watch James had left me. Every time I opened it, the hands still moved steady, unbothered, as if time itself didn't care how much trust people were losing. Then the doorbell rang. 3 knocks quick, confident, rehearsed. I wiped my hands on a rag and opened the door. Emily stood there, smiling in her beige wool coat. Beside her was a man tall, good posture, hair neatly parted, and a smile that knew exactly how to enter a room without raising suspicion. "Dad, this is Ryan," Emily said, her voice bright with pride. "The one I told you about." Ryan reached out his hand. "Mr. Whitaker, it's an honor. Emily says you're the most principled man she's ever known." I shook his hand. Firm, but not too firm. Calculated the handshake of someone who's negotiated before, but his skin was dry. Too smooth. Not the kind of hand that's ever held a wrench or rebuilt an engine. I smiled faintly. "Just call me John. I'm retired now." He nodded, scanning the living room as if cataloging it. The space was modest, a few old bridge models I'd designed years ago, Grace's photo on the wall, and a solid oak filing cabinet I'd built myself. His gaze lingered there 1 second too long. It wasn't curiosity. It was measurement. People who've spent their lives observing can always spot someone calculating. Dinner. Emily made lasagna, the smell of melting cheese mixing with damp wood and rain outside. For the first time in months, the house felt warm again. Ryan played his part well. He pulled out her chair, poured wine for me, talked just enough to seem humble, and avoided every question that might reveal too much. He knew how to make people comfortable, but not how to make them believe. Halfway through the meal, he looked up. "So," he said lightly, "I heard you used to work with James Whitmore?" He was quite the investor, especially in real estate. The fork in my hand paused midair. Emily's eyes flicked toward me, a silent plea. "Don't react." I smiled. He understood something most people forget. That profit means nothing without trust. Then I changed the subject, asked about his business. Ryan launched into a perfect performance. Commercial subdivisions, floating interest rates, capital restructuring. He spoke like a man reading from a financial manual written by someone else. I listened, but I didn't believe. Men who truly make money from land talk less, and they never need to prove it. As I described one of my old bridge projects, his gaze wandered again to the filing cabinet behind me. Just a flicker of attention, but it was surgical, exact, like he was drawing blueprints of the room in his head. After dinner, Emily began clearing the table. Ryan offered to help. He took off his vest, rolled up his sleeves, and carried the plates to the sink. Water ran softly, a sound too calm for the tension building beneath it. He looked up at the framed photo of Grace on the wall. "She was your wife?" "Yes," I said. "She must have been proud of you." I answered slowly. "No, I was the one proud of her." He smiled that same practiced smile. Then he asked, "How long have you lived alone?" 8 years. Must get lonely, he said, tilting his head just slightly. I looked at him long enough for the silence to make him look away. Then I said quietly, "People only feel lonely when they're with the wrong person." The air in the room thickened. Emily returned with dessert and broke the silence with an almost nervous laugh. "Dessert time," she said. Ryan's smile returned instantly, a mask sliding back into place. Later that evening, they went downstairs to look through old family photos. I stayed behind in the living room, sipping wine and listening to their voices drift up from below. And then I heard him, whispering, "Just give me a chance, and you'll never have to live as modestly as he does." Every word fell like cold drops of rain on the back of my neck. I didn't move, didn't interrupt, only listened. Emily's voice was small, uneasy. "Don't say that, Ryan. My dad's not poor, he's just different from you." He chuckled softly. "Different? No, sweetheart. I'm just better at it." The words hung in the air like smoke. I didn't go downstairs. Didn't confront him. Because sometimes silence is sharper than any accusation. And because I wanted to see just how far that smile would stretch before it cracked. When they left, he shook my hand again, still firm, still calculated. "Thank you for a wonderful evening, Mr. Whitaker. I look forward to seeing you again." I smiled faintly. So do I. But in my mind, I already knew. We would meet again, just not the way he imagined. The house fell quiet after they drove away. Silence has its own kind of gravity. It pulls every thought to the surface. I walked back into my study, the faint glow from the desk lamp spilling over the oak cabinet. That's when I saw it. A smudge on the edge of the drawer. Circular, greasy, fresh. I leaned closer, tilted the light. A fingerprint. Not mine, not Emily's. Someone had touched the cabinet. Recently, he'd been here, in this room. I pressed a tissue against it. The oil was still wet. And I felt that familiar chill. The one you get when you realize someone's already 2 steps ahead of your caution. I sat down and opened my notebook. Wrote, the 14th of January, 2024, Ryan Brooks. First glance, ambition. Second glance, confirmation. I looked up at the photo of Grace. She was still smiling. The same soft, knowing smile she always wore when I was too blind to see what she already knew. The night she died, I promised I would keep Emily safe, even if it meant protecting her from the truth. Now I realized that promise was about to be tested. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in the dark, listening to the rain tap the roof, the clock ticking like a warning I couldn't decipher. On the desk sat the cold coffee I'd forgotten to drink, and the pocket watch James had left me. I opened it, the hand still moved, steady as ever. I whispered, "You knew something, didn't you, James? You knew who they were long before I did." The streetlight outside threw a faint beam through the window, hitting the filing cabinet, the one hiding a secret as heavy as lead. I knew it was only a matter of time before someone tried to open it. The next morning, Emily called. Her voice was light again, cheerful, untouched. "Dad," she said, "Ryan wants to have you over for dinner this weekend. He wants you to meet his mother, Vivian Brooks." I paused. "Vivian Brooks," I repeated slowly. "The PR consultant?" Emily laughed. "I don't know, maybe. She's amazing. You'll like her." I forced a smile she couldn't see. "Of course, sweetheart. I'll be there." A beat of silence. "Don't worry. I just want to see the house you're walking into." When the call ended, I looked out the window. Seattle rain again. But this time, it didn't sound gentle. It sounded like footsteps. Approaching, deliberate, unstoppable. Some eyes don't need words to tell you who they are. Greed has its own language, and it always looks straight at the thing it wants. Seattle in February feels heavier than winter itself. The sky is the color of steel. Rain doesn't fall. It hangs fine and cold, as if even the willow trees by the lake have bowed in surrender. Ryan had invited me to dinner. "Mom really wants to meet you," he'd said over the phone. She actually knew Emily's grandfather. His tone was casual, polite, even. But somewhere in that calmness, something stirred. Because if that was true, then his mother belonged to the same world James Whitmore once ruled. The world where trust was written in invisible ink. The restaurant was Elliot's on the bay. All glass walls and reflections of gray water. When the waiter opened the door, I was met with the scent of expensive perfume, white wine, and salt air. Inside, I saw Emily laughing the kind of laugh she hadn't had since her mother died. Ryan stood beside her, one hand resting on the back of her chair in that quiet, possessive way men use when they want to remind a room that something or someone is theirs. Across from them sat a woman in a deep red coat, blonde hair tied in a perfect bun, black gloves still on. Vivian Brooks. I knew immediately, not because of her elegance, but because of her presence. People who have spent years in politics don't watch you. They assess you. Vivian rose as I approached, her smile precise enough to be printed in a magazine. "Mr. Whitaker," she said, her voice low, smooth, and perfectly measured. "It's an honor. I've heard so much about your work, the Fremont Bridge. Isn't it? Still standing, I hope?" "Still standing," I replied. "It's only people who leave." Her smile never faltered, but something flickered in her eyes, quick, sharp, metallic. The waiter poured wine. Crystal touched crystal. Dinner began. The first 20 minutes were nothing but polite conversation, weather, wedding plans, the market. Ryan talked too much. Emily smiled too often. And Vivian listened just enough to appear interested. Every time Ryan said words like investment, trust, or shareholder value, she didn't look at him. She looked at me. Her expression never changed, but her eyes, they were reading something between my silence. When the main course arrived, she set her glass down. Her tone shifted silk to steel. "You knew James Whitmore, didn't you?" I looked up slowly. "Yes." She nodded. "So did I. A remarkable man, and quite gifted at keeping financial secrets." The sentence landed like a stone dropped into still water. The ripples spread across the table in silence. Outside, rain struck the windows thin, relentless, cold. Emily tried to laugh it off. "Grandpa was just cautious, that's all." Vivian smiled at her, almost tender. "Caution is a form of power, dear. Not everyone understands that." She raised her glass again, but her eyes stayed on me, unblinking. Inside my chest, a familiar unease returned, the same one I'd felt the day James was buried. "If you reveal it too soon," his voice whispered in my memory, "they will come for her." Vivian moved with precision, every gesture polished, rehearsed. The way she folded her napkin, the way she refilled her wine, even her pauses had timing. People like her didn't act natural. They performed control. And control, in her hands, looked like elegance. I told a few stories about Emily as a child, how she used to draw bridges in the sand and say one day she'd build one big enough to reach the clouds. Vivian smiled warmly. But her next question cut through the warmth like glass. "And do you still keep all of James's things, Mr. Whitaker?" I tilted my head. "I'm not sure what you mean." She shrugged, eyes glinting. "Oh, you know, records, assets, papers. A man like you doesn't easily forget where the important things are." Then she sipped her wine slow, deliberate, never breaking eye contact. That's when I realized, some people don't threaten you outright. They plant questions and let you dig your own grave trying to answer them. After dinner, I excused myself to wash my hands. From the hallway mirror, I could see their reflection through the glass partition. Vivian had leaned closer to Ryan, whispering. Her lips moved slightly, a few quiet words, then a small, satisfied smile. Ryan nodded. When I returned, everything was normal again. Too normal. We talked a little longer. Pleasantries. Future plans. Then, we stood. Vivian extended her hand one last time. Her palm was cold not from the air, but from something that lived deeper. "It was lovely meeting you, Mr. Whitaker," she said. "I have a feeling we'll see each other again." Her tone was gentle, but beneath it, I heard something else. A statement, not a wish. I nodded. "I believe we will." Outside, the wind had picked up. Rain struck sideways, spattering my face as I opened my umbrella. In the glass door, I caught my reflection. And behind it, hers. Vivian stood inside the restaurant, still watching. She wasn't smiling now, just looking. With the same quiet calculation I'd seen once before. At James Whitmore's funeral, the red coat, the stillness, the stare. I closed the umbrella and walked toward the street, letting the rain fall where it wanted. Every step felt heavier, because I finally knew what James had meant by they. That night, sleep never came. I sat in my study. The letter from James unfolded on the desk under the lamplight. "If you reveal it too soon, they will come for her." I traced the ink with my thumb. It had faded, but the warning hadn't. They were no longer a mystery. They had a name. Vivian Brooks. The next morning, Emily called. "Dad, what did you think of her?" she asked, her voice bright. "I know she's a little formal, but she's actually really kind once you get to know her. She said she wants to help with the wedding. She knows all the best people in media." I said nothing for a moment, Because how do you explain to your daughter that the person offering to help is the same person planning the script? Finally, I said quietly, be careful around people who make others believe they're helping. Emily laughed, thinking I was joking, but I wasn't, because manipulation wrapped in manners is still manipulation. That evening, I sat alone at my desk. The rain had returned steady, insistent. When I opened my laptop, a new email appeared. No subject line, no greeting, just one sentence. June will come sooner than you think. VB. I stared at the screen. My heartbeat slowed, each thud heavier than the last. June. It wasn't a month. It was a countdown. I printed the email, slipped it into my notebook beside my old entries, and wrote beneath it, the 10th of February 2024. They're here, and they've already started the clock. Politeness is a mask. And behind it, I can already see the teeth of greed. Lake Union was cold that morning. Cold and beautiful, in a way that almost felt cruel. A silver mist floated over the water, turning the moored yachts into ghostly silhouettes. Everything, every flower, every flicker of light, every note from the grand piano drifting out of the hall, was perfect. Too perfect. The kind of perfection that only money or manipulation can buy. I arrived on time. Old gray suit, black tie, the same one I wore to James Whitmore's funeral. A few event staff glanced at me with faint confusion, as if they couldn't quite understand why a quiet, aging man in a modest suit was standing in the middle of a $300,000 wedding. But I didn't care. I wasn't there to celebrate. I was there to observe. Because I'd learned something over the years, every portrait of happiness has a crack. You just have to look long enough to see it. People hold weddings to bind themselves with promises, but some promises exist only to disguise the real contracts written beneath them. The venue was a glass palace, built right on the edge of the lake. Hundreds of crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling. Photographers, journalists, sponsors. It looked less like a ceremony and more like a press event for the elite. A massive banner stretched above the main hall. Brooks, Whitmore Wedding. A union of legacy and vision. I read the words slowly. A union, not a marriage. Emily emerged from behind a white curtain, glowing under the stage lights. Her gown trailed behind her like liquid pearl, the kind of dress made to be seen, not worn. Applause swelled as she walked down the aisle. Ryan stood waiting at the end of the red carpet, smiling that camera-ready smile, the kind that made people believe he truly loved her. But I didn't see love. I saw a man standing at the center of a transaction. The ceremony unfolded exactly as planned. The officiant spoke about destiny, connection, two families united by faith and vision. It was flawless. Too flawless. Every moment rehearsed. Every word designed. When the minister finally asked, "Do you, Ryan Brooks, take this woman to love and cherish?" Ryan looked at Emily and said, "I do." His voice was steady, strong, and just a little too polished. Like a line read by someone who'd practiced in the mirror. The room erupted in applause. Confetti rained from the rafters. People laughed, clapped, lifted glasses. I didn't move. Because I knew no one truly smiles on the day they sell their soul. Not unless they were well paid. Dinner followed. Champagne, caviar, imported steak. Music floated through the air, all soft strings and polite laughter. Then the LED screen at the front of the hall flickered on. The host announced, "A journey of love." A sentimental melody began. The first photo appeared. Emily as a child, brown-haired, laughing by the shore with me and Grace. Laughter filled the room again, genuine this time. I felt my throat tighten. Then came her graduation photos, her first job in Portland, her trip to Hawaii with Ryan. Moments of light, of youth, of trust. But then, the screen flickered, and another image appeared. My old house. Peeling paint. Rust on the garage door. The old pickup truck sitting in the yard. Across the photo, in bold white letters, "Where she came from?" A silence fell over the room. Then, a single laugh. Then another. Whispers. "So vintage," someone said. "Ah, humble beginnings," another chuckled. Emily froze. Her lips trembled, her eyes glistening. Ryan slipped an arm around her shoulders and whispered, "Don't worry, it's just a joke. Everyone knows." A joke. I stood up, said nothing, and walked out. Nobody stopped me. Nobody even noticed. Because in that room, the cameras were turned toward the smiling couple, not the father quietly erased from the frame. The corridor outside was long and cold. I stepped to the balcony overlooking the lake. Below, the water shimmered under the ballroom lights. Beautiful and indifferent. A waiter passed by, pausing briefly. "Are you all right, sir?" I nodded. "I'm fine. Just thinking about how everything I built now belongs to someone else." He smiled politely and walked away. Then I heard it, the soft rhythm of heels on marble. I didn't have to turn around. I already knew. Vivian Brooks appeared beside me, her red coat gleaming against the silver mist, a flute of champagne in her hand. She stood next to me, looking out over the lake. Her voice was calm, almost gentle. "You should be proud, John. Because of you, your daughter has stepped into another world." I turned to her. "The world you're talking about. Does it ever truly belong to anyone?" She smiled, eyes narrowing slightly. "No, but some people know how to keep it longer than others." She raised her glass, took a sip, and added quietly, "James Whitmore understood that. You, I suspect, do not." Then she set her glass down on the railing and walked away, leaving behind the faint trace of cold perfume, the kind that lingers long after the person's gone. I watched her disappear into the light, feeling that strange, heavy stillness, the kind that settles right before a storm breaks. When I returned to the main hall, the music was louder, laughter brighter, as if the room itself was trying to drown out what had just happened. Emily was smiling again, but her eyes red, wet, betrayed her. I stayed near the edge of the crowd, unseen. Ryan was speaking with the event manager, voice low but assertive. He signed something on a clipboard. Then, a white envelope slipped from his pocket, fluttered to the floor. No one noticed, except Moo. I walked over, bent down, picked it up. The letterhead read, "Patterson and Co., Attorneys at Law." In bold print, "Power of Attorney, Ryan Brooks." I didn't open it. I didn't have to. Through the translucent paper I could see a few words. Emily's name, a scanned signature, a provisional notary seal, and I understood. This wedding wasn't about love. It was about control, a legal consolidation disguised as romance. I placed the envelope back on the table, silently. Ryan looked up. He'd noticed me. "Didn't expect to see you still here, sir," he said with a forced smile. I met his eyes. "I was just trying to figure out," I said quietly, "who actually got married today." For the first time, his smile faltered. He laughed to cover it, but his laugh came out dry. I turned and walked toward the exit as the band began playing "Can't Help Falling in Love." Behind me, I could hear the applause. The cameras, the laughter, the music swelling. Through the glass doors, I saw Emily rest her head against his shoulder as they danced. The crowd cheered. Flashes popped. It looked like happiness, but I knew better. What they were witnessing wasn't a wedding. It was a contract, signed in the currency of my daughter's trust. The rain began again on the drive home. In Seattle, the sun never lasts long enough to matter. The drops hit the windshield, blurring the city lights into streaks of gold and gray. I pulled over by the lake and rolled down the window. Cold wind rushed in. The only sounds were the waves and my own breath. "I thought you'd choose the right man, Emily," I whispered. "But you didn't love the wrong person. You just trusted the wrong smile." I took out my notebook and wrote, "April 2024, doa mi 2024. The wedding of someone else. The Blessed One was not my daughter. The victor now holds the power of two families." I closed the book, started the car, and let the headlights slice through the rain. In the music of a wedding, I heard something else. The sound of survival. The sound of people willing to bite even their own blood. Seattle in May carries a kind of light that can't decide what it wants to be. Half real, half imitation. As if the city is pretending it never learned how to rain. From my window in Green Lake, I could see across the water toward Queen Anne, where Emily and Ryan had settled into their new life. A 2-story house with glass walls and a balcony that overlooked the bay. People called it the Seattle version of the American dream, but I knew better. A beautiful house can hide many things, except the cracks spreading underneath the paint. 3 weeks after the wedding, Emily called. Her voice was soft, careful. "Dad, we'd love to have you over for dinner. I'm cooking this time, not Ryan." I could hear it. That polite hesitation people use when they're asking for help without saying the words. I agreed. That evening, I drove to Queen Anne. When she opened the door, I smelled something unfamiliar. A mix of oak wood and expensive perfume. Cold, sharp. It didn't smell like her. The walls were lined with oversized wedding portraits. bright smiles frozen under silver frames. On the dining table sat 2 glasses of wine, an unopened bottle, and a file folder placed slightly off-center, as if someone had just set it down in a hurry. Ryan walked out of his office, smiling as though the Lake Union incident had never happened. "Mr. Whitaker," he said warmly, "welcome to our new home. I've been getting things organized. Emily's still learning what it means to be the wife of a businessman." He lingered on that last word, businessman, like it was a sacred title. I smiled faintly. As long as she's happy, that's all that matters. "Oh, she will be," he said, pouring wine. When he leaned over, I caught a glimpse of the print on the file folder. Whitmore Trust inquiry, pending verification. The words stared back at me. Ryan saw where my eyes had gone, but he pretended not to notice. He kept talking about real estate, tax policy, investment zones, filling the air with meaningless confidence. But I wasn't listening anymore. When his phone rang and he stepped away to answer, Emily moved closer. Her voice trembled. "He's been asking about Grandpa, about Whitmore Holdings." I told him, "I don't know anything." I looked at her, at the fear hiding behind politeness. "Do you trust him, Emily?" She hesitated, then shook her head. I took her hand. "Then stay quiet. In this kind of game, your words are just tools for someone else's story." That night, rain returned soft, rhythmic, and perfectly timed for thinking. I brewed coffee and opened my laptop to review some old Whitmore Holdings records. Before I could begin, a new email appeared. From Whitmore Legal Trust at gmail.com. Subject: verification request, guardian confirmation required. It read, "Dear Mr. Whitaker, please confirm that you remain the legal guardian and custodian of the Whitmore Family Trust documents. Failure to verify may result in reassignment procedures. Whitmore Legal Trust Division. No logo. No contact information. Just a signature at the bottom. Susan Blake-esque." The name of the attorney who had handled James Whitmore's estate. For a moment, my pulse quickened. It looked real. It felt real. Almost. But there was something wrong. Something cold beneath the surface, like touching metal that doesn't belong to you. I didn't click the link. Instead, I called an old friend, Mark Hansen, a cybersecurity engineer who'd once built defense systems for Boeing. "Mark, I need you to look at an email," I said, "but don't open the link." Half an hour later, he called back. "John, whoever sent this is playing a big game. It's not from Google servers. It's a throwaway account from Florida, masked through a Russian VPN. And here's the interesting part. I'm listening. The sender's digital footprint connects to someone who sued Ryan Brooks 2 years ago for cryptocurrency fraud." I sat in silence. Mark continued, "You want me to dig deeper?" "Not yet," I said. "Just log everything and don't tell anyone." When I hung up, I stared at my reflection on the black laptop screen. An old man, sitting in the dark, finally seeing the enemy clearly, and realizing he can't tell anyone, not even his own daughter. Greed rarely walks alone. It brings company. People who know how to turn a keyboard into a weapon. 2 days later, I drove back to Queen Anne. Ryan was gone. Emily opened the door, eyes tired, dark circles beneath them. "He wants me to submit a weekly spending report," she said. "Even my personal account. He says it's for transparency." I clenched my jaw, forcing my voice steady. "Do you have any documents about him? Company records, shares, anything?" She nodded, opened a drawer, and handed me a thin file. The first page read, "Brooks Asset Holdings, LLC, filed March 2023. A newly formed company. No activity listed. No tax ID registered yet." Then, 1 page deeper, a line crossed out in red ink. "Vivian Brooks, managing partner." I closed the folder. "Emily, listen carefully," I said. "If he ever asks you to sign anything at all, tell him you need to consult your attorney, Susan Blake. Don't sign alone." She nodded, unsure, but I could see it. The first flicker of suspicion, the kind that grows into survival. That night, I reopened the email and read those words again. Pending verification. Ryan's printouts had carried the same phrase. Then I remembered what Vivian had said that night at Lake Union. "You should be proud, John. Because of you, your daughter has stepped into another world." Now I finally understood what she meant. That other world wasn't luxury. It was a system, a machinery of paper, passwords, and power, built to move money from the honest to the strategic. A game where every signature was a weapon. I printed the entire email thread, sealed it in an envelope, dated and logged every page, then locked it inside my safe, next to James Whitmore's original letter. Before I closed it, I added one final line to my journal. May 17, 2024. They've begun to trace the path. But greed always leaves a scent, even in the air. The next morning, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. No caller ID. A text. We know what you're hiding. RB. I stared at the screen and felt something unexpected. Not fear, but calm. Ryan thought he was intimidating me. He didn't realize I'd spent a lifetime working on bridges that swayed under hurricanes. I'd watched steel bend, concrete crack, and I'd learned one thing. What doesn't break under pressure simply hasn't met enough of it yet. I switched the phone off and looked out the window. Rain again. Always rain. Droplets streamed down the glass like lines of code, each one tracing its own path, like data running backward into the past. Somewhere out there, Ryan Brooks believed he was about to win, but he didn't understand the man he'd challenged. I wasn't trying to stop him anymore. I was going to let him dig, until the ground collapsed beneath him. Greed rarely walks alone. It drags with it those who know how to weaponize a smile, and those who turn silence into their own undoing. Seattle didn't just rain that night. It poured as if the sky itself were trying to wash every trace of sin off the earth. Wind howled through the trees, rattling the glass like an angry warning. I was in my study, reviewing the forged emails Ryan had sent, when the phone rang. Emily's voice came through, shaking, broken, drowned in fear. Dad, I'm not safe. He knows everything. About Grandpa. About the money. The coffee cup slipped from my hand, shattering against the floor. Scalding liquid splashed across the papers. 4 words left my mouth calm, deliberate. Lock the door. I'm coming. There's no sound that sobers a father faster than the sound of his daughter crying in fear. I drove through the storm, headlights cutting through sheets of rain that looked like silver knives. Every turn echoed with the pounding in my chest. An old engine running on nothing but adrenaline. I didn't need GPS. I knew every slope of Queen Anne District by heart. When I reached the Brooks house, it was dark. No music. No lights. Just the pale glow of a laptop bleeding through the living room window. The front door wasn't locked. I pushed it open and stepped inside. The air reeked of red wine, smoke, and something acrid, like electricity after a short circuit. On the table sat an open MacBook. Its screen glowed a ghostly blue. A PDF file filled the display. Power of attorney, Emily Brooks. My stomach tightened. The signature at the bottom perfectly scanned, perfectly forged. One document like that, one careless confirmation, and he could legally seize control of the Whitmore Trust. Behind me, footsteps. Ryan Brooks stepped into view. White shirt half-buttoned, eyes red, glass of wine dangling from his hand. Well, he slurred. The old man finally shows up. Funny how you're just like Whitmore, hiding money, pretending secrets make you moral. I didn't answer. I just looked at him. You think I didn't know? He said, coming closer. Your daughter isn't that clever. She left Trace's emails, drafts, notes. You think you're the only one who knows about the trust? My hand slipped into my pocket, finger tapping my phone, voice recorder already running. You're drunk, Ryan. No, he hissed, smiling wild. I'm finally awake. You and I, we're the same. Men terrified of losing control. Emily appeared at the top of the stairs, her face pale, eyes swollen from crying. Ryan, stop. What are you doing? Doing what I should have done months ago, he shouted. He hurled the wine glass. Red liquid splattered across the white wall, a stain that looked too much like blood. He grabbed a wedding photo from the shelf and smashed it to the floor. Glass shattered like gunfire. Everything's mine, he screamed. This house, this money, the Whitmore name mine. Emily stumbled backward, rain blowing in through the door he'd left open, hair soaked, tears indistinguishable from the storm. I stepped between them. Nothing here belongs to you, Ryan, I said, voice low, measured. You're just borrowing other people's names to survive. He froze, eyes narrowing. You think I'm afraid of you? I lifted my phone. The screen glowed, tiny red dot blinking. His face flickered between shock and rage. I pressed save recording. He lunged for the bottle in his hand, and for a moment, I thought he'd throw it. Enough, Emily screamed. The bottle slipped, shattered at his feet. I took her hand. Come on. We ran through the doorway, into the storm. Rain lashed against us, blinding and relentless. "Get in the car," I shouted. Her hands trembled as I opened the door. She was clutching something, the broken wedding photo she'd grabbed before we fled. When we pulled away, I looked into the rearview mirror. Ryan stood on the porch, drenched, head tilted, eyes wild. Lightning cracked across the sky. For an instant, his face lit up, a twisted smile, like a man blessing his own downfall. We drove for miles before Emily spoke again. Her voice was barely a whisper. "Dad." I was wrong. I didn't answer. I just held her hand tighter. After a long silence, she asked, "What did Grandpa really leave me?" I turned, meeting her eyes. "Not money, Emily. Trust. And the kind of legacy you can only keep by not losing yourself." As we turned down the lake road toward my house, I saw it. A black SUV parked along the curb, engine off, headlights dark, no license plate, facing the street, ready to follow. I slowed the car, watching it through the mirror. The inside was pure shadow, but I could feel the presence, patient, waiting. "Dad, who is that?" Emily whispered. I exhaled slowly. Maybe the people James warned me about. I pulled over 2 houses short, turned off the lights, waited. Minutes passed. Then twin beams flared to life. The SUV rolled away, disappearing into the rain. I don't fear the darkness outside my door. I fear the smile hiding the darkness inside a man. That night, I made tea for Emily and settled her on the couch. When she finally drifted into sleep, I sat back at my desk and pressed play on the recording. Ryan's voice filled the room. Raw, arrogant, broken. "Everything's mine. You're just like Whitmore, you hide money too." I saved the file. Renamed it. Rain, Confession, 6, 2024, MP3. Encrypted it. Copied it to a separate drive. Then I opened my journal. The page was blank except for the date. The 12th of June, 2024. Confessions don't need force. They reveal themselves when a man truly believes he's already won. I closed the book. Rain still hammered against the window. Outside, the city was asleep. But inside me, something had awakened. Something steady, patient, precise. The part of me that understood pressure. The part that had waited too long for justice. I looked out into the storm and whispered to the night. I don't fear the darkness outside my door. I fear what smiles behind it. And with that, the engine of justice, dormant for years, finally began to turn. Seattle was still raining. But this was no cleansing rain. This was the kind that tested you, that asked whether you could stand long enough in the dark to prove you belonged there. 3 weeks had passed since that night. Emily had moved back in with me. The house felt heavier, quieter, safer, at least on the surface. Ryan had vanished. No calls, no message, just silence. But silence, I've learned, is often the most dangerous sound in the world. The most dangerous people aren't the ones who rage. They're the ones who know when to stay quiet. On the morning of July 2nd, my phone rang. Susan Blake, the attorney who'd once read James Whitmore's will. Her tone was tense. "John, I just received notice that someone filed for verification of guardianship over the Whitmore Trust, and it wasn't you." My chest tightened. "Who?" "We don't know yet. But the submission came through a notary in King County. The stamp reads, Notary of King County." At the same time, Susan looped in a private investigator. Mark Jensen, a former police detective with a reputation for getting results. Mark wasn't the charming type. He was all gravel and edges, leather jacket, nicotine voice, and eyes that looked like they'd seen too much. He walked into Susan's office and said flatly, "You want Ryan Brooks found?" I shook my head. "I want to know what he's hiding." Mark leaned back, crossed his arms. "No problem. I tailed him back in 2019. Insurance fraud case. He staged a car fire to collect the payout. They suspected him, couldn't prove it. He walked free." I asked, "And his mother?" He smirked. "Vivian Brooks. She's the one running the company on paper, Brooks Asset Holdings." I checked the filings. Fake capital transfers, ghost subsidiaries, and proxy accounts offshore. Classic paper laundering. Legal enough to survive audit, dirty enough to sink anyone attached to it. Susan looked up from her desk, eyes sharp. "John, if they have any copy of the Whitmore Trust, they could file for asset control. Once the court recognizes it, you'll never get the funds back." I turned toward the window. Rain was tapping against the glass. Steady, deliberate. "Then we move first," I said. "Before they do." Mark began digging. A week later, he He called me from downtown Bellevue. His voice was low, but the sound of traffic bled through the line. John, I got eyes on Vivian. He sent a photo grainy, taken from a telephoto lens. Outside a mirrored office building, Vivian Brooks stood in the rain, red trench coat gleaming like blood under the streetlights. She was handing an envelope to a man in a gray suit. The watermark on the envelope read, Notary of King County. Mark spoke quietly. She's buying a signature. Not her first time either. It's how they create notarized duplicates, fake but verifiable. Once filed, it looks like the real thing. Can we stop it? I asked. Maybe, but we'll need hard evidence. Once the paper hits the system, it's legally binding, unless we can prove forgery. On July 12th, Susan and I met at her downtown office. We combed through every file connected to the Whitmore estate. Susan was meticulous, almost obsessive. Every document numbered, sealed, cataloged. She smiled faintly. Everything's secure. Only you, me, and my assistant know the codes. But that night, the phone rang again. It was Susan. Her voice was trembling. John, my office. Someone broke in. I grabbed my coat, drove through the midnight rain. When I arrived, police lights painted the wet pavement in red and blue. The glass door was shattered. Ceiling lights flickered. Inside, Susan sat on a chair, pale, hands shaking. I don't understand, she whispered. They took only one thing. She handed me the inventory sheet. Folder 7B, Whitmore Family Trust. Original copy. Gone. Some thefts don't take everything, I said quietly. They take just enough to make the rest meaningless. I walked straight to the security room. 2 officers were reviewing the footage. The hallway camera caught a blurry silhouette. A woman, tall, blonde hair, red coat. One of the officers said, "Can't get a clear face. She knows where the cameras don't reach. All we got is the back angle." I stared at the screen. Her movements, the posture, the precision. I'd seen them before. Vivian Brooks. The next morning, Susan called again. Her voice was hollow. John, we just received a fax from the notary office. A new copy of the Whitmore Trust was filed with a valid seal. Name listed under guardian, Ryan Brooks. She hesitated. And John, the notary stamp? It matches the one from the photo Mark took. I didn't speak for a long time. The coffee on my desk had gone cold. Outside, the city was gray and motionless. Vivian hadn't just stolen information. She was rewriting reality. One forged signature at a time. I remembered her voice at the wedding. Soft, steady, certain. You should be proud. Because of you, your daughter entered another world. Now I finally understood. That world wasn't wealth. It was manipulation. Later that afternoon, Mark sent another file. An audio clip recorded from a street mic near the notary building. The sound of rain, footsteps. Then her voice. I want the confirmation done before the 15th. Once it's sealed, he won't have a chance to fight back. Mark's voice followed through the line. They're about to make their move. If you want to protect your daughter, we'll have to hit back first. Feed them a false trail. Let them believe you've already handed the original to an insurance attorney. I nodded slowly. Do it. Let them think I've stopped watching. That night, I sat alone in my study. The storm outside had quieted to a drizzle, the kind of rain that lingers like unfinished business. Across the room stood the safe. Behind its steel door was the one thing they didn't know still existed, James Whitmore's original envelope. I placed my hand on the cold metal and whispered, "You were right, James. They are here." Lightning flashed. Through the blinds, light spilled from a house across the street. For a second, the shadow on my wall shifted. Long, tall, human. Someone was watching. I stepped to the window and lifted the curtain. Nothing. Only a black SUV parked across the street. No headlights. Windows tinted. Then a flicker. A cigarette ember glowing briefly. Then fading to black. No one hides better than those convinced they're the victims. I picked up my phone and typed 4 words to Mark. They're already here. Then I turned off the lights. In the dark, I could still hear it. The rain, heavier now, pounding against the roof like a slow drum. It wasn't cleansing anymore. It was counting down. A warning. A heartbeat. The sound of an approaching confrontation. One that neither side could escape quietly. Seattle in early August. The sunlight was gold, but cold, as if even the sun knew to keep its distance. Since the break-in last month, everything had gone unnervingly quiet. No word from Vivian, no trace of Ryan, just anonymous text messages and the same black SUVs drifting past my street every night. Never stopping, never speeding, just watching. The city was calm, too calm, and I'd lived long enough to know that silence never meant peace. In war, silence means preparation. In the world of money, silence means they're rewriting the rules. On the morning of August 6th, my phone buzzed. A message. No greeting, no signature. Coffee. Just once. No lawyers. The 1920 Cafe, 4th Avenue, downtown Seattle. I didn't need a name. I knew exactly who it was. Vivian Brooks. I arrived at 9 sharp. The 1920 Cafe was tucked inside an old red brick building, narrow, discreet, its windows reflecting the constant stream of lawyers and executives outside. Inside, the air smelled of roasted beans and burnt wood, and jazz music floated through the space like smoke. People here dressed like every sentence they spoke could be used in court. Vivian sat in the back corner, white coat, hair pinned high, dark sunglasses hiding eyes that didn't need to be seen to intimidate. She smiled, thin, precise, polite. A smile that said, "I already know how this ends." "John Whitaker," she greeted, her voice soft, sharp, like a knife cutting through silk. "You came. I thought you might send someone to represent you." "I don't like letting others speak for me," I said, taking the seat across. She stirred her coffee, one slow turn. "Good. I appreciate honesty. I used to work with James Whitmore, you know. He didn't trust anyone except me. I understood the true value of his trust. And I know you're holding something you can't control." I met her eyes. James never partnered with anyone who lacked integrity. She chuckled quietly. "Integrity?" she repeated, almost amused. "Heroes die, John. Realists survive. I'm here to make you an offer. Transfer management of the trust to me, and I'll give you 20%. 20% of what?" She leaned closer. "Of your silence." I took a sip of coffee. Bitter. Cold. "You can't buy what isn't for sale." Vivian tilted her head, and for the first time, her smile vanished. "You think this is about money? You think Whitmore left it for your daughter out of sentiment? He chose her because he believed you could guide her. But you failed, John. Your daughter is in the hands of a man you invited into her life." I held her gaze. "Calm. Maybe you should ask yourself," I said, "why your son needed a dead man's money to feel alive." Her lips curved slightly. "A dangerous kind of amusement. You still don't get it. This isn't about family. It's about power. And if you don't transfer control, the court will do it for you." She rose smoothly, lifted her purse, and before walking away, whispered, "Then let the court decide." She left behind the unpaid check, and the lingering scent of perfume, sharp and metallic like cold steel. I stayed for a while, staring at my reflection in the cafe's window. The people outside were moving, smiling, buying, pretending. But somewhere, beneath the surface, a storm was forming. Vivian wasn't bluffing. She was preparing for war. That night, I met with Mark Jensen in the underground parking lot of an old office tower. He arrived late, coat soaked, hair disheveled, a small USB drive clenched in his fist. He slid into the passenger seat, breathing hard. "She made a mistake," he said. He plugged the USB into my dashboard laptop. A recording began to play. Ryan's voice, slightly slurred, unmistakable. "Ryan, once we get the money, we'll divorce her." Vivian, "Good. She'll blame him, not us." Ryan, "And the old man?" Vivian, "He'll be gone before that." The audio ended. The silence after was heavier than the rain outside. Mark turned to me, pulled from Ryan's old phone. A tech contractor at his insurance firm kept a backup. I ran the waveform analysis. It's authentic. I nodded slowly. Conspiracy to defraud, forgery, and attempted theft of a registered trust. Plus abuse of power of attorney, Mark added. He looked at me. "This is enough to bury them." The next morning, we brought the evidence to Susan Blake. Her office was silent, except for the hum of the air conditioner. She hit play, and the recording filled the room. Ryan's voice. Vivian's. Both so calm like they were planning dinner, not a crime. When the line, "We'll divorce her," played, Susan looked up. Her eyes were steel. "This," she said, "is the legal hammer we've been waiting for." She opened her laptop, typing fast. Petition to the King County Superior Court. Charges: attempted fraud, document forgery, conspiracy to obtain financial trust by deception. "If we move now," Susan said, The hearing could happen by September. Once the summons is served, there's no escape. I nodded, watching the Seattle sunlight slide across her desk. Bright, cold, unforgiving. That night, back home, I sat before the safe, the steel door that had become the heart of this quiet war. Inside was James Whitmore's original letter. I opened it slightly, tracing the handwriting that time hadn't erased. Protect her, even when she doesn't understand you. I closed it carefully, because in this game, the strongest weapon I had wasn't evidence. It was patience. 2 days later, my phone buzzed again. A message. You think you've won? I've never lost a game I designed. No name, no number, but I recognized the rhythm of the arrogance. Vivian. I didn't reply. I forwarded it to Mark. His response came in seconds. Let her think it's still a game. The most powerful player isn't the one who writes the rules. It's the one who makes others believe they're following them. That night, the city was asleep. I sat by the window, looking out at the reflection of streetlights on Lake Union. Seattle was quiet again. But inside me, something had awakened. Not anger, not hatred, just resolve. When money becomes the goal, love turns into a contract with conditions. And some contracts are meant to be broken. Seattle didn't rain that morning, but the sky looked heavy enough to break. Clouds pressed down over the city like a concrete ceiling ready to collapse. Outside King County Courthouse, the air crackled with noise. Police barricades, reporters, cameras flashing in bursts so bright they made the gray morning look electric. You could smell metal and rain in the air, and the tension of people who came to watch someone else's ruin. Emily stood beside me on the courthouse steps, hands clenched together. She was trying to appear calm, but her eyes, those same eyes that once searched for shells on the beach when she was 5, were now fixed on the doors ahead, as if they were gates to another world. Next to her was Elena Vasquez, our attorney. Small frame, sharp presence, Cuban-American, mid-30s, a woman who carried every word like it could change gravity. Before we went inside, she adjusted her glasses, glanced at me, and said, "Today, truth will speak whether they like it or not." Some trials aren't about punishment. They exist so that greed can finally kneel. Second floor, East Wing. Old oak benches. Fluorescent lights humming. The smell of polished wood and stale coffee. The room was packed, press on one side, spectators on the other. Even the air seemed to lean forward to listen. At the defense table sat Ryan Brooks, hair slicked back, face pale, suit too tight across the shoulders. He looked like a man pretending to know how to breathe. Beside him sat Vivian Brooks. Immaculate white blouse under a black coat, dark glasses masking everything but the faint tremor at her jawline. If pride had a scent, she wore it. And high above them, Judge Walter Hayes, known for dismantling white-collar criminals the way a mechanic dismantles broken engines methodically, without emotion. He lifted the gavel. The sound echoed like a shot. Case number 2, 4K, C915. The State of Washington versus Ryan Brooks and Vivian Brooks. Charges: attempted asset fraud, document forgery, and notary tampering. Carl Benson, their lawyer, rose first-tailored suit. Smooth voice, the kind that's practiced lying so long it forgets what truth feels like. Your Honor, my client simply sought to formalize a family arrangement after marriage. Any procedural errors were clerical. There was never criminal intent. He produced a thick binder labeled Power of Attorney Emily Brooks. He handed copies to the bench. Under the courtroom lights, the signature shone slightly blue printed ink, not pen. Even from my seat, I could see it. Too even, too perfect, like a heartbeat drawn by a machine. My stomach tightened. I'd seen blue ink like that before on forgeries disguised as trust. Elena stood slowly, unhurried, as if she had all the time in the world. She wheeled a cart forward, opened her laptop, and connected it to the courtroom screen. Your Honor, the plaintiff introduces Exhibit A, an authenticated audio recording and investigative report prepared by former Seattle PD investigator Mark Jensen. She didn't look at the defendants. She looked at the judge. Confidence, not arrogance. The lights dimmed slightly. The screen flickered. Then, sound. Ryan Brooks. Once we get the money, we'll divorce her. Vivian Brooks. She'll blame him, not us. Ryan. Make it look official. The old man won't live long enough to stop us. The air went dead. Even the reporters forgot to type. Somewhere in the back row, a pen hit the floor. A small, brittle sound that made everyone jump. Ryan froze, his face drained of color. eyes darting left, right, anywhere but forward. Vivian's gloved hand tightened on her purse. The faint tremor at her jaw turned into a visible shake. Carl Benson shot up. Objection. Judge Hayes's voice cut through him. Overruled. He leaned forward, eyes fixed on Ryan. Mr. Brooks, is that your voice? Ryan's lips parted, but no words came out at first. Then, I don't recall. Maybe someone edited it. Elena didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. Forensic authentication confirms it's his voice, Your Honor. Verified by waveform and frequency pattern from the Washington State Forensic Lab. No cuts, no splices, no doubt. The judge nodded once. A collective murmur rippled through the room like distant thunder. Vivian lifted her chin, finally meeting my eyes. There was no mask left in that look, only calculation and fear. The powerful always believe they own the narrative, until the sound of their own voice rewrites it. Mark Jensen took the witness stand. His gray jacket looked worn, his voice steady like gravel. He walked the court through months of evidence, fake email domains, redirected bank accounts, offshore transfers from Brooks Asset Holdings to a shadow company in Florida labeled MB Trust Holdings. Each slide Elena displayed felt heavier than the last. April 2025, doa sute opcech, 0. May 09, 120,000. June 01, $450,000. All leading to the same recipient, Vivian Brooks. You could feel the shift, the quiet click when everyone in that room understood what had happened. Carl Benson tried to stand his ground. My client merely acted as financial custodian for her son. There's no proof she knew the funds were illegitimate. Elena smiled politely, the kind of smile that ends wars. Permission to introduce Exhibit B. On screen appeared a photograph, grainy, night shot. Vivian, red trench coat, handing an envelope to a man in a gray suit under a street lamp. The seal clearly visible. Notary of King County. Gasps filled the room. Even the judge sat back. Elena closed her file. Your Honor, some people think they can steer justice, but justice eventually takes the wheel. Judge Hayes sat silent for a long moment. You could hear the fluorescent hum above, the shuffling of paper, someone's shallow breathing. Then 3 sharp strikes of the gavel. Enough. The court finds overwhelming and credible evidence of fraudulent intent. All assets under Brooks Asset Holdings are to be frozen pending federal review. Bailiff detained Mr. Ryan Brooks for notary fraud and attempted asset theft. Ryan shot to his feet. Wait, no, it wasn't me. It was her. She planned everything. He pointed at Vivian, voice cracking. Vivian stood, lips trembling. She pushed his hand aside, her tone flat, final. Enough, Ryan. The handcuffs clicked. Cameras flashed. The sound was deafening. Reporters shouted questions. Mr. Brooks, do you regret it? Did your mother order it? Ryan didn't answer. He kept his head down, tears mixing with sweat, led away through the sea of cameras. The crowd parted like water, closing behind a sinking ship. Vivian remained standing. For the first time since I met her, she looked small. Her fingers gripped the table edge so hard, the knuckles whitened. Her eyes wandered across the courtroom, searching for an escape that didn't exist. When her gaze finally found mine, the silence between us said everything words never could. This was never about money anymore. When the judge adjourned, the spell broke. Reporters surged forward. Microphones, camera flashes, the roar of questions. Elena gathered the files neatly, zipped her case, and leaned close to me. We've won the first battle, John. The rest belongs to the prosecutors. I nodded, but there was no satisfaction. Only a quiet exhaustion that felt like smoke after a fire. Outside, wind tore through the square. The clouds, darker now, rolled low across the skyline. As we descended the courthouse steps, sirens wailed, police cars pushed through the crowd, and flashbulbs turned daylight into white lightning. A reporter shouted, Mr. Whitaker, how does it feel to see justice served? I didn't answer, because what happened today, didn't feel like justice. It felt like gravity doing its job. Across the street, Emily waited near a lamppost. Her coat fluttered in the wind. When our eyes met, she smiled through tears. And in that moment, I knew she finally understood why I'd stayed silent all this time. Justice doesn't arrive quickly. But when it finally comes, it leaves no one standing. Later that evening, after the courthouse emptied, I walked the corridor alone. The marble floor still echoed with the footsteps of the day. At the end of the hall hung the state seal, a circle of bronze, tarnished by time, yet shining faintly in the fluorescent light. I paused there, hand on the cold railing. Behind me, faintly, the janitor's radio hummed a tune from the 70s. Ahead of me, the door to courtroom 2B stood ajar. Inside, rows of benches empty now, papers scattered, a lone coffee cup half full. I walked in, just for a moment, and the air still held the ghost of voices. Once we get the money, she'll blame him. The old man won't live long enough. They weren't just echoes of guilt. They were proof that truth, when recorded, never dies. I picked up the coffee cup and threw it into the trash. Then I stood at the defense table, the same place Ryan had sat hours earlier, and whispered, mostly to myself, "You built your world on paper, Ryan, but paper burns." Outside, the courthouse lights flickered off, one by one. The city exhaled. Somewhere down the block, reporters filed their stories, headlines already taking shape. Mother and son charged in Whitmore Trust fraud. From luxury to liability, the Brooks downfall. I didn't stay to read them. I just walked into the Seattle night, the wind sharp against my face, the taste of rain still hanging in the air. Above, thunder rolled softly, not as threat, but as closure. Because sometimes, the loudest sound in the world is the silence that follows justice. Justice doesn't roar. It whispers, waits, and then it strikes. Seattle in late October. The rain had turned thin and silver, falling like threads of glass over the wet streets. People called it the most beautiful season of the year. To me, it was simply the season when truth began to shed its disguise. News of Ryan Brooks's arrest spread like oil across water. Every network, every morning talk show, every podcast with a microphone had something to say about the heir who forged his way into fortune. From the Seattle Times to Northwest Herald, headlines screamed across their front pages. Heir fraud scandal. Ryan Brooks arrested for notary fraud and attempted asset theft. Every morning, when I stopped by the corner store for coffee, his face was there printed on glossy paper. The same smile that once made my daughter believe love could buy safety. Justice is never free. It always takes something. Dignity, silence, or the last bit of faith you thought you had. 3 days after the verdict, the headlines shifted. The public had found a new name to devour. Vivian Brooks. The woman who once moved through Seattle's financial elite like a queen through marble halls was now the subject of talk shows and comment threads. Her reputation, once immaculate, was now a public exhibit. But Vivian didn't stay silent. That Monday morning, Northwest Today aired a special announcement. The headline ran bold across the screen. Exclusive interview. Vivian Brooks speaks the truth. Emily and I sat in the living room as the broadcast began. The intro music was loud, urgent, the kind of score used to make gossip sound like breaking news. Then she appeared. Vivian Brooks. White suit, flawless hair, perfect posture. A woman who still believed that if you spoke beautifully enough, truth might just switch sides. Across from her sat Martha Lowell, a veteran anchor whose calm tone could melt or expose anyone depending on the day. Martha didn't waste time. "Mrs. Brooks, the people of Washington want to know. Did you instruct your son to falsify the power of attorney in order to seize control of the Whitmore Trust?" Vivian smiled faintly, tilting her head. The old politician's smile, halfway between sympathy and superiority. "No, I'm just a mother. Everything I did was to protect my son. If anyone is to blame, it's those who exploited our trust." Her voice was smooth, her gestures precise. It was a performance crafted from decades of practice. The camera panned slowly, capturing every glint of studio light in her eyes that still measured every word as currency. The host nodded softly, but I could see something shift behind her professional smile. The signal that an ambush was coming. Behind Vivian, the giant LED screen flickered. The interview music cut abruptly. A clip rolled. No music, no warning. Just raw audio. Vivian Brooks. "We'll sell the house once we secure the inheritance." For 2 full seconds, the studio froze. No one spoke. No one even breathed. Vivian's lips parted, but no sound came out. The studio lights seemed to burn brighter, revealing every tremor under her foundation makeup. Martha turned toward her, voice calm, surgical. "Can you explain that statement, Mrs. Brooks?" Vivian's color drained. Her hands twitched. I don't know what that is. It must be edited cut from something else." But her eyes darted off camera. searching for rescue that wasn't coming. The silence in the studio became its own kind of noise. The camera zoomed slowly, catching the exact moment when power left her face. When the law can't make them bow, the light simple, merciless, does it instead. Vivian blinked, once, twice. Tears welled but didn't fall. Then, she did something no one expected. She stood, on live television. She tore off the microphone, its wire snapping audibly against her collar. Then she threw it on the desk and walked out. Past the cameras, the audience, the producer, shouting her name. The director didn't cut to commercial. He let the moment breathe. Because collapse, when real, doesn't need narration. Outside the studio, chaos erupted. The lobby glass doors burst open into a blizzard of flashes. Reporters surged like water around a broken dam. "Mrs. Brooks, do you regret it? Where is your son being held? Did you ever love anyone but yourself?" Vivian tried to move through them, head lowered, coat clutched around her like armor. Her heels slipped on the wet pavement. A streak of red lipstick smeared across her cheek like fading war paint. By the time she reached her car, she looked less like a queen, and more like a woman finally realizing the crown had always been rented. That night, the clip flooded every platform online. Within hours, Vivian Brooks' breakdown live on Northwest Today hit 5 million views. By the next morning, it was 10. The comments section was its own courtroom. Karma served cold. She built a kingdom of lies and watched it burn. Finally, the queen of manipulation got exposed. And one comment from an anonymous user stayed with me for hours. Some people aren't punished by what they lose, but by what everyone finally sees. I turned off the television. The room fell into the kind of silence that has weight. Emily sat on the couch beside me, eyes red from exhaustion more than tears. "Dad," she said softly, "will they forgive her?" I shook my head. No one can forgive someone who chose to make themselves the victim of their own greed. She nodded slowly, then whispered. She looked human at the end. "Isihed, that's the cruel thing about justice, Emily. It doesn't shout. It doesn't come with fire or vengeance. It just turns on the light. And whoever can't stand in it falls apart." Emily looked down, her tears quiet, steady. Outside, the rain had started again. Soft, continuous, as if the city itself was rinsing away the last of the noise. The next morning, the papers ran another headline. Vivian Brooks leaves Seattle, sources say for medical recovery. Photographs showed her at Tacoma Airport, head covered, face turned away from cameras, boarding a private flight to nowhere the public cared to name. No one followed. No one asked for more, because sometimes the final image is already the sentence. In the public eye, her trial had ended on that studio floor. The gavel had been replaced by the lens, the verdict, humiliation. And for someone like Vivian Brooks, that was worse than prison. The most terrifying punishment isn't confinement. It's being seen. That night, I sat in my study, the house dark except for the faint hum of the old desk lamp. The rain tapped against the window like it had something to say. Across the room stood the iron safe, the one I'd guarded for a year. I ran my hand over the cold surface, feeling every scratch, every memory it held. The air smelled of metal, ink, and old dust, the scent of things that had waited too long to be revealed. For a moment, I hesitated, because opening that safe wasn't just about unlocking steel. It was about accepting what time had done to all of us. I turned the dial. 1 click, 2, 3. The tumblers fell into place with a dull, mechanical sigh. Inside was the envelope, the real Whitmore Trust, and beneath it, the letter. To John, if you're reading this, it means you've protected what I couldn't. Loyalty. I traced the handwriting. Old, uneven, still strong. I looked toward the window, the city lights shimmering through the rain like scattered coins. I thought of James Whitmore, of his last words, and of all the people who had tried to buy what he meant to preserve. "You were right, James," I whispered. They came for it, but the only thing worth keeping was never the money. I resealed the envelope,